Hey guys, our AWP friends, it's Sanny. Please don't laugh, I know my voice is disgusting, but I'll be narrating our video for Draw My Protest. So it's like a twist on those Draw My Life videos, but ours is way cooler. So say hey guys.
Hey.
Jacob's using his amazing editing skills for this video, and our Picasso is Priscilla. Picasso Priscilla. She'll be drawing for visual purposes so that you guys aren't bored out of your mind. So let's get started. So the question that we are trying to answer is, how should one respond to a world with which they disagree, or to a world that is oppressive or even harmful to them? Our position on this is to approach with the most nonviolent way possible. We will be using authors such as MLK, Olga Khazan, Alex Knapp, and Sasha Cohen, to further explain that nonviolence is the way to go to our disapproval of the world we live in. Our beloved Martin Luther King Jr. fights for nonviolence and advocates for peaceful protesting methods. This method of protest means that participants of this act are doing actions that cause no harm to others or no destruction to the environment. King argues that, quote, nonviolent direct action seeks to create such a crisis and foster such a tension that a community which has constantly refused to negotiate is forced to confront the issue, end quote. Page 150 in our guidebook if you wanted to know. So, connecting this to Sasha Cohen, to King, a writer and historian of gender, sexuality, and social movements, symbolic power is close to direct action because the protests had this effect where they gained many supporters without really having to resort to violence. It shows that nonviolent protests is a symbolic power because it draws the attention of many by using mere presence of individuals to call for action. Now let's talk about Khazan's point of view. In order to attract more people in the movement, Khazan argues that peaceful protests tend to have more effect on gaining more supporters than radical protests. She refers to the research found that the study's participants were less willing to support a fictional group of animal rights protesters who broke into the animal testing facility than those who marched peacefully. Khazan argues, quote, people generally don't see themselves as disruptors of the social order, Willard told me, even for causes they believe in, end quote, page 168. More specifically, they usually don't see themselves causing destruction and chaos to the environment in which they live in. The end goal for any protest is to gain supporters that usually don't agree with you, and so the more conservative the protest, the better. Here's a short clip of MLK explaining why nonviolence is the best method in the video that can be found on YouTube. Dr. King, nonviolence is the most powerful weapon.
Was trying to bring out. It seems to me that there are three ways that oppressed people can deal with their oppression.
What are they, Dr. King?
Well, one is to rise up in open violence, in physical violence, and some persons have used that method, persons who have been oppressed. But I think the danger of that method is its futility. I feel that violence creates many more social problems than it solves.
May I?
Now, Alex Knapp. He takes a more logistical approach. He explains that, quote, their conclusion was that nonviolent movements were twice as likely to succeed as violent movements, and that nonviolent movements often significantly increase the chances of a more peaceful and democratic government emerging in the aftermath, end quote, page 171. Furthermore, the protests reflects on how the government would be formed. The people got to say what they wanted to say in their protest, a democracy will be formed. It sort of becomes almost like a parallel structure to the government acted in the protest. In addition, Knapp argues, quote, even when authoritarian governments respond to resistance movements with violence, nonviolent resistance still produces superior results to armed struggle, end quote, page 172. This further proves that nonviolence is still the better alternative. Now, moving on to Sasha Cohen. She argues that movements as a collective were far more successful because, again, they had symbolic power, as mentioned in MLK's slide. The movements that were successful were nonviolent. Those who did sit-ins back in the 1960s had to endure the many verbal and even physical abuse to get their point across. And along the way, they have gained the sympathy of white college students and others in favor of their movement. For example, in 1941, A. Philip Randolph and Bayard Rustin rounded up 100,000 people. We're talking about 100,000 people, guys, to march on the nation's capital in protest of the racial discrimination in the U.S. military. get this, they didn't even have to march. The planning of that peaceful protest already pressured President Roosevelt at the time to issue the executive order desegregating the war industries, page 176. So, no use of violence there. Protesting methods like these, quote, disrupted business as usual and used public space to make a spectacle that commanded attention, end quote, 176. It's like you can't help but look and see that violence didn't burst and come to play. People made a huge impact on the success rate of the protests without violence. So in the end, to answer the question, we should approach the world in which we disagree with nonviolence. Nonviolent protesting is necessary in order for the success rate of the action to be high, and that the effect it will have on the people will also influence them to approach other things with no violence. So to go back and sum up what all the authors argued, MLK stresses that the oppressed can always express their feelings through peaceful protest. Kazan acknowledges that people see themselves more in the protests that are peaceful than those that are more radical and extreme. Knapp argues that the nonviolent protest reflects on the government in which they will create, more specifically, a democracy. And finally, Cohan refers back to the event in which everyone as a collective joined in a protest that pressured President Roosevelt to the desegregation of war industries. See? No use of violence there once again. We're just trying to say violence is not the answer. Teach that to your kids. We don't want to see no more world star hip-hop videos in the future. You know what I'm saying? So that's it, guys. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. We got this. We have about 3 more weeks of this class. We're going to pass. Go to office hours. Make revisions on your essays. And most importantly, let's enjoy this tight-knit class until the end. Because we might or might not see each other again, but thank you, Dr. Tiernan, for such a wonderful class and putting up with us. Thank you, Ashlyn, for almost making us regret our existence with your savageness during mentor meetings. And thank you, my AWP classmates. We got this in the bag. Let's push forward.